Okay.
Yep, perfect. So good afternoon and welcome to the second of our series on innovation in times of crisis. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Nick Vermeulen. I'm the partner in charge of innovation and technology in the firm of PwC in the Channel Islands. I'm delighted to be joined with by Leyla again this afternoon. Leyla, do you want to just do a quick intro?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Leyla Yildirim. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for PwC in the Channel Islands. I've been in the firm for 20 years, but only 2 years working for the Channel Islands firm. One of my previous roles in the firm, I worked with our financial services global innovation team.
Perfect. So just a couple of housekeeping points. I don't need to tell you where your exit is, but this event is being recorded. And you can ask questions wherever you want. Please just raise your hand by clicking on the chat button, and we'll read those chats as we come through the presentation, and we'll seek to answer them. So just a bit of a recap. I know that some of you attended last week and others of you that didn't. Last week is available as a recording, so if you want to see what we talked about last week, you're more than welcome to pick that up after this session. So what did we talk about? We talked about how innovation actually goes hand in hand with times of crises, and it's usually the times of our greatest challenge that you see disruption and human ingenuity coming and creativity coming to the fore, and ideas follow. So we heard about some examples from the SARS epidemic, the financial crisis, and more recently we spoke about some other things that you've been seeing as a result of the COVID-19 challenge, and looking at specifically how people have focused on getting the supply of PPE to those who needed it, when the supply chain of those items actually completely collapsed because China and those countries that produce those items have gone into complete lockdown, and the product was not really available. So that's what we spoke about last week. As you would remember, if you were on, we set some homework and we're going to pick that up in a bit. But I thought I'd start off with a quote. So the quote there is from someone called William Pollard. Now, I don't know, many of you will know, but this is a quote, and it's not a recent quote. This is from the 1800s. William Pollard was a Quaker. And this stuff is not new, but I think the biggest thing that that I see in this quote is that the arrogance of success is what some people actually leads to their downfall and demise, as especially as businesses. Just look at Kodak and the Kodak moment they had when whilst they invented the digital camera, they didn't actually commercialize it, and they are no more, or they are, but they're in a significantly different form than they were, and they went through various things to get into that form. So this what we're talking about today is not new. It's been around for ages, but we do know that you have to think differently and constantly adjust what you're doing to remain successful for a sustained period. So do you want to go on to the next slide, Jade? Oh.
So just a reminder from last week, we talked about the 5 steps towards innovation, and step 1 really sounds very obvious, but it's framing the problem. So what is the problem that needs to be solved? And sometimes we don't even know that we've got a problem until it comes and smacks us in the face, and some of us are finding that right now as we go through this crisis. The second piece is around pulling a team together of people that are going to be able to help. And that team doesn't necessarily have to be people that are all in your own organization. Actually, you can find better ideas are created the more diverse the team that you have that you pull together. The next stage is then obviously generating ideas. And hopefully the homework videos that we shared with you would have given you some good suggestions of ways in which to do that. And look, generating ideas as a team is challenging in a time where we can't meet physically in person. But there are some really excellent tools like Google Jamboards we mentioned last time, that you can do that in a virtual way. The next step then is building your prototype and testing it, and I think that testing point is key. You need to keep testing and refining until you've got something you know is going to work. And then the final stage is making it happen, so really getting your idea out there and into production. Now, this is where often the whole thing can start to slow down as governance, legal requirements, etc., can come into play. But it's amazing how, when you're in the midst of a crisis, that timetable can often be accelerated significantly, as we heard with some of the examples. So Nick, do you want to remind everyone of what the homework was?
Yeah, so the homework was to go away and think about the problems you're facing. It didn't matter where the problem was, at home, social problem, health, and just think about a problem that you wanted to try and solve, and then think about who you'd need to collaborate to actually solve that problem. So who you'd have to get into the group, and then thinking about what tools and techniques you could use to do that. Now, the videos on the right, hopefully you enjoyed watching those. They have a tendency to spark my imagination when I want to think about something, and there were some really good examples in there. I know he talks about coordinating the uncoordinated, which we spoke about last week. When people want to do something but they don't know what it is that they would actually be beneficial to do, and actually coordinating and actually taking that power and actually driving it forward in a coordinated way. I quite like that idea, because I think that's what the island needs to do at this point. We all know that coming out of this, we want this island to be prosperous, and we're all thinking, well, what is it should we be doing? And if we all pull in the same direction, and it turns out to be the right direction, then we'll get some real good traction, and we'll actually come out of this possibly in a stronger place than we went in. So if you watch the videos, good, great. If you haven't, they are really good, to go back and look at it. And what they actually start looking at, and they use a framework called the ideas framework, and it is all about starting by just imagining the best possible vision that you could come up with. What is your best possible scenario? So go long, go right out onto left field. What does it look like out there? If I did something really different, what would it do? And when you look back at people who have had significant impacts on the businesses or society, they have thought differently. They've done things which at the time you think, well, why are they doing that? And they've actually moved people and actually changed the world in which we live. So imagine, then actually take a look at what you've imagined and try and expand and dissect it, so you can look at the potential strategies, analyze those strategies. So think about a full box model, typical consultant. What is the top right look like? What's going to have the biggest impact for the least amount of effort that I can actually put in, and what's going to be completely different. And then communicate. As Leyla says, you won't be able to do any of this stuff by yourself, but you need to sell your ideas, communicate it, and actually bring people that you've actually thought you would need to along on that journey. So we're now hoping, I'm praying that you've actually done your homework, because now we're going to get into the audience participation section. So Jade, do you want to just go on to the next slide? So what we wanted to do, hopefully you've got some examples. We're going to call on the guys from the Digital Greenhouse to share their example in the first instance, and then hopefully we'll be able to pick up some more. If we don't get any and there's tumbleweed coming across the screen, I will give you an example. I hope not to have to get to that stage, but otherwise you're going to be listening to me talk all the time. But if you do want to, just raise your hand in the chat, and we'll come to you. But the idea is to basically share some of the ideas you've been thinking about, and then we can talk it through. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the team from the Digital Greenhouse.
Hiya. So I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name's Jenny. I'm a development officer at the Digital Greenhouse. And so part of my job role is to put together these events, and quite heavily we work on face-to-face basis. So obviously this has been quite a challenge for us with COVID-19 and having to stop all of that and re-look at what it means to deliver that content and how we can do it. So my challenge question or my problem statement was, how can we move our workshop facilitation into that virtual space? And I think the main thing with that is it can be quite easy to teach tools, so present, you know, different methods of working, but actually part of workshop facilitation is creating that energy and that inspiration and those interactions between teams. So that's what we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks. So that covers off stage 1, I guess, and then really looking at our dream team. So Nick and Leyla, I love the way that you approach this in terms of like thinking about what skills or expertise you might need, because I think that's a really, like, rather than thinking of, you know, oh, who do I normally work with, or who do I get on well with, or who do I know, it's actually thinking, okay, what are those skills, and who's got expertise in that area. So for us, really, we're looking at things like teaching. We're also looking at people who have experience with sort of looking at digital platforms and you know, different ways of delivering content online. And then perhaps we might consider calling on people who have taken part in our face-to-face workshops to get some of their thoughts on, you know, what worked well, and perhaps they might have some insight on what could be carried across into that virtual space. So really, you know, we're quite lucky that some of those skill sets, well, nearly all of those skill sets sit within our team. So we've been sort of hosting Jamboard sessions. So looking at the tools and techniques, really in this context, we've been testing by doing, because it's so close to the original sort of challenge question, that actually using some of those tools whilst trying to generate those ideas and map out what virtual workshops might look like is a great way of testing in real time. We also think that, as I said before, it's keeping that energy up. So really a technique is having fun with it. I know that a few of our team have really enjoyed the drawing facilities on Jamboard, and we almost had to sort of give a bit of a timeout just so that people could experiment with them before that, before we got down to the nitty-gritty. But there's another tool that we were introduced to called Mentimeter, and this might be a great one for online seminars and things as well, because it creates a word cloud through everyone's contributions. So you can go on and type in, you know, your keyword for that topic, and then as everyone types in their keywords, it builds this word cloud, which is a really great way of creating those visuals, you know, in this virtual space where normally we would be sort of working with whiteboards and sticky notes and things like that. And then I think things like music, so not forgetting, you know, Spotify playlists. You can still have like online conversation and just give everyone a link to a Spotify playlist to listen to while they work. You know, things like that, I think we're experimenting with to see how they go. And then obviously the next stage is really getting people's feedback and seeing what they think about how successful that's been, and then iterating from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting example, because I think when we come out of this, how we engage with our clients, you know, who are spread across the world, will be really important. And so some of the learning you're doing there would be really important. I know I've been talking to someone at Guernsey Finance, or we are Guernsey, and they're looking at how they do all their events, and they're looking at exactly the same issues. You know, what tools should be using to, you know, host a webinar for 50 people, 60 people. How do we get the engagement? How do we get, you know, the energy levels up? How do we get a shared experience? I like the Spotify one. I don't know if anyone's done a shared you know, cheese and wine tasting, but that's an interesting scenario where you kind of you deliver something that's physical to someone, and there's a shared experience coming through, which just increases the engagement level. You know, so I really think that even everyone can learn from all of those, and if we share best examples of about how we work and what works, I think that's really important, because that's going to impact everyone. People will want to work with people that they're fun to work with, and they're actually getting the work done. So there's a number of things in there. Leyla, do you have any views on that?
Now, I really love the example, and I think what you'll find, Jenny, is that in some ways what you've come up with will be even better than what you had in the physical session. It's unlikely probably that you'll go back to running things exactly the way you did before. I think there'll be elements of what you're creating now that you'll keep for the long term. This isn't just about kind of filling a gap while we're not able to meet face to face. Really good example.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we one of the other tools that we've used when we're doing stuff like that is Slido. So that works really quite well, because you can do a real-time poll whilst you've got something else on the screen, and you can then just project the results back into the what you've actually got on screen. So you're actually doing stuff in real time. And I think Leyla's right. We'll when we do a seminar, what we might find is that we do it in a way that people can be in the room and people can also engage online going forward. And I think that the power of that will be really important, because we're then projecting our image and our messages out further as well. So yeah, good example. Did we get any more on the chat? We didn't. Silence.
Nick and Leyla, one comment that I have had over and over again over the past months is, for example, if you're a self-starter, it can be a jungle out there with just trying to connect with the collaborative group. So when you go back to the point about where diversity is key, maybe having all of these virtual opportunities is going to open up a whole new longer term world. Is that what you think?
I think you can. I don't know. I think Leyla's right. I think the engagement we're getting now is different, and in some ways it's better, because you're getting a more direct face-to-face conversation when you're talking to one person. And I just think that there's some things that we were trying to do in the business beforehand that we were struggling to get everyone to adopt. Well, they've just had to adopt them now, and everyone's kind of got used to working in a different way. So I think it will change, and it's just a matter of figuring out exactly how we embed the best of what we've got into everything we do going forward. I think. Does that answer the question?
Yep, good.
Leyla, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say I think in Guernsey we're a small community as well. It's easy to reach people and to make those connections. And I think Lucy Kirby sent you all the link to the Hive platform they've created. I think that's a really good way of just posting on there what you're looking for. And I think Guernsey will come to help, and that's what we found with the PPE example. And I think why not do the same for other ideas that we have on the island?
Yeah. I mean, and Evelyn's raised a good point there. So Evelyn's one of my partners from PwC. So yeah, Evelyn's right. Getting out there and making new relationships with clients in a BD environment is going to be trouble, or it's going to be harder, because you're meeting people initially face to face on remotely at the moment. So that's kind of interesting, but it can be done. We've done a number of pitches internally and externally where I've never met the team I'm working with in the UK, but we're pitching to a client. It's just you have to prep for it. So that external BD as an island, I think, will be really important. And I think that getting the Guernsey, the team at We Are Guernsey and the Digital Greenhouse guys to work together in the same way and present this is how we do it. This is the best of what we found. That will be really good, because that BD stuff will be really, really quite challenging, I think, for us as an island, and it will be really important. But equally, I think what we also need to do is we need to start engaging with our existing clients, using the modern technology and actually get them using it, because I think there's some real value. We can increase the engagement levels. If you think about it, if you're a fiduciary trust business and you were flying off to the UK to see your clients, you might have been doing that once every 2 months, 6 months. Virtually you can go and see them every time they ask you to do something, and you can get more engagement up. So I think we need to make certain everyone's aware of how to do this and what it actually will mean, because you get more face-to-face time. So what did Lucy say? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you're right, Lucy. It is actually easier to have a say, and it's easier to have a say in a meeting, even because people have to listen, and there's not so much talking. Yeah. Yes, yeah, and exactly. I know we recorded this event last week. That makes it a lot easier. I know I can't always attend everything I love to watch. There was something that Al Gore did a talk the other night. It's on my list of play stuff that I actually want to watch going back, and because it's recorded, I can. I couldn't do it live, but I can actually watch him do his speech, which is really good. So yeah, I think it does really help. Right. So I don't see any other ones coming in of people wanting to talk about the homework they did. So with that, I will just give you an example. Now, this is something that we've been working on, over the last 18 months, 2 years. Some of you will know that we do a lot of tax work, and that tax work can be an admin burden for our clients. It takes a lot of time. It's very complex. You need some quite specialist stuff, specialist answers. You need some good knowledge, and it can present a risk to our clients because they kind of get a tax return wrong. It can be a problem. So what I'm going to talk to you about is what happened with economic substance introduction. So the problem we were dealing with was new legislation being introduced into the islands, into all the Crown dependencies and other locations. Which meant that the historic returns that the fiduciary clients might have done in volume, which are global tax returns, weren't allowed anymore. The filing deadline is still the end of this year, and there's penalties if you don't get the filing right. And some of the data points that are asked, because this is new legislation, some of the data points have never been thought about before. So this is stuff that some people don't know. No one have ever asked some of the questions. I was hearing today that someone in the Isle of Man was telling me that they're actually asking for the number of minutes that you spent in your board meeting, not just the dates of the board meeting. So if that's actually true, that's another data point which I never ever thought anyone would ever ask for, but they seem to be. So each company has to submit a return, and you've got to submit GAP compliant statements. So that is a big burden to the wider industry, and especially the fiduciary space. Less of an impact on funds because they generally know a bit more about the funds they're administering. But we've got some administrators who've been looking after entities in the BVI, and they need to pick up all this information which they just don't know. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Jade? So when we first started looking at it, we basically thought, well, this is going to be a whole new system. We're going to have to do something. We're going to have to get all the data together. It's going to be, we're going to have to go out and whole tax reporting system. And we went and spoke to a number of people. We basically went and spoke to a number of our existing clients, and slowly but surely it became evident that that's not really what they wanted. They wanted, to leave their data where it was. They wanted to increase the data that was in those systems, and they wanted to keep the core information there. They wanted it to be efficient. They wanted to be able to ask our tax teams a question 24/7 anytime, and they wanted an immediate response about whether a company was captured or not. And it's like, well, hang on, how are we going to actually deliver that? I don't want my staff working on a Sunday evening answering, are you caught by economic substance? So we need to think about this differently. I wandered into one meeting with one client, and they basically turned around and said, well, I just want an API that I can call, and I want you to respond whether we're captured or not. And so, and at that point, it's like, okay, right, I see what you're asking for. And by having those conversations about what people actually wanted, talking to people, collaborating early, we identified that the majority of our clients were on one core system, NAV1, which is a system developed by the team in Jersey that work for Navision down there. And most of our clients are on that. So we went and we had a conversation with them, and we showed them exactly what we'd done, and we showed them the workflow. We said to them, we'll give you that workflow, and we'll tell you how to do it. You build it in, and we'll build an API that everyone can call from Nav. They can call it any time they want, 24/7. And at the output of it will be a Word document which can go in front of the board before they make their decision about what they wanted to, say about their economic substance, and before the filing of the return that needs to go into the tax authorities. So we took a look at that and we said, well, does that work? And we set about and we said, yeah, that does work. It would de-risk it for everyone. The guys at Touchstone in Jersey who build the product basically aren't tax experts. They don't want to become tax experts, but they want to know that their clients are calling on that, that tax expertise when it's needed. And so we basically built the solution, and that's what we've been rolling out to everyone. It's something which you can adapt and you can change. We've used the API for a number of things now. So client front-end portals where you've got 10,000 sets of information to pick up from individual clients, and we've ended up with a far better solution than we would cold towel on our head and just not talking to anyone else. So that's broadly what we did. So we went through, imagine, so if I had to take you back to what we talked about, imagine the possibility. What I wanted to do was to be able to provide a service that could be called 24/7, and any of our clients could call that service anytime, a bit like picking up the phone and getting a response from us about whether you're caught or not. We looked at it, we analysed it, we expanded it, we went out and spoke to the guys at Touchstone, and we did all of that. And now we're in the phase of actually taking it out and making certain everyone wants to use it. So that is my example.
Yeah, what I like, Nick, about that is that the old way of addressing that problem would have been, we can help you with your tax returns. That would have been the sort of old way of addressing that problem in a very manual way. Or if we were trying to be a bit more forward thinking, we would have said, we've built you a system, you can put your data in it and it'll do tax returns for you. But what we've done here is something far beyond that, which is using the system they already use every day and pulling the data and automating the whole process for them. So I think it couldn't have been achieved without all of the connectivity with the different stakeholders. But I think what we've got at the end is a really interesting product.
Yeah.
So just thinking back to the quote from Pollard at the beginning, and the upskilling piece, and listening to those examples, a lot of our clients ask us, how do you foster that culture of innovation in your own business? And I think, we've all heard these examples of where maybe big companies have these innovation teams that they put in a room and put bean bags in there and hope that they're going to come up with the next iPhone or the next Uber. And that's not really innovation, and in fact it rarely works. And I think even Jenny and Lucy, there are some people that thought that's what the digital greenhouse was there to do too. Look, innovation can come from any part of the business and from any worker in that business, no matter how inexperienced that person may be or how new to the business they are. In fact, some of the best ideas can come from people who may have only been in your business a short time, but they've recognized something that could be done in a better way. And I think that is the key, is having the right environment where your people feel that they've got the permission to challenge the way we do things around here, and that when they have got new ideas, they're likely to get some support for those ideas. So in this sense, really understanding the power of technology to drive new ways of doing things is critical, because much of the innovation we've just been talking about has all been made possible because of technology, hasn't it? So the more people understand the capabilities of tech, the more likely they are to come up with great ideas on how to use it to fix problems. And look, that doesn't mean all of your people have to become coders or deep technology experts, but they do need an awareness of what technology can do and how it might help in their jobs or how to solve their clients' problems.
Yeah.
I think Nick, I think we've also got to think about the fact that a lot of today's jobs aren't going to exist in 10 years' time. And, Nick and I and the team at PwC have been looking at what the future of jobs looks like for the island. But, we really have a responsibility to upskill people so they're ready for those jobs of the future.
Yeah, and I think Leyla, what you're talking about on the authority piece is that it's the authority to ask the why question. I remember going into my first job and I used to naively ask, why do we do that? In my first job, it wasn't PwC, by the way, but it was somewhere else. But I think sometimes it is the person who just looks at things and says, hang on, why are we doing it that way? Because then you get the continuous improvement. If someone can't articulate why we're doing it, it's like, well, hang on, do we need to do that? And you can always look for efficiencies that way. And I think the value of those, why, how, what, when, those types of questions are really important. But the why one is really the one. You need to give your staff the authority to question, why are we doing this?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a few stats up there on the slide, but a few I wanted to draw out. The top left one there, 79% of CEOs around the world are worried about the availability of key skills. So this is CEOs from our global survey saying that the lack of key skills is one of the greatest risks to their business. And that they're not going to be successful without having access to that talent. And the stat underneath, the 46% saying that the way they're addressing that risk is by upskilling their current staff. Now, when we used to run this survey in the past and they talked about lack of skills, the response was always, well, we're going to recruit more people, or we're going to look at international mobility. But basically, CEOs are telling us what they need isn't available in the market. So they're having to look at, how do we upskill the staff that we've already got in our business so that they can fill the gaps that we have. And then a couple of other interesting points. The bottom one there, 48% of CEOs saying they're not able to innovate because of a lack of skilled people. On the right-hand side there, from a people perspective, 55% of people are worried automation or other innovation is actually going to take their job. And this is a real concern for people looking to the future and thinking, is my job even going to exist? Am I going to be replaced by a robot? And underneath that, 74% ready to learn new skills or retrain to remain employable in the future. So I think that's really encouraging. People want to retrain, they want to upskill, they want to embrace what tech can bring to themselves and to their careers. Okay, Jade, I think if we go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so I think this is quite an interesting question. We're talking about innovation and now we're talking about upskilling. And why is that? I think Leyla articulated it just a bit before. If people don't know the art of the possible, then they won't think differently. Yeah, so if you don't know that it is possible to collect data and put it through an engine and get a response back 24/7, you'll just be picking up the phone and saying, I'll answer your tax questions on the phone. So if they don't know it's possible to do that, they won't innovate. So that is why you need to upskill, because what you'll find is in your populations, you've got people at different levels. We're all slightly different. You'll find that you've got someone who's very into their technology and is adopting everything, and you'll find at the other end of the spectrum you've got someone who's anxious, and I think about what this actually means, and they might not adopt it, but he's equally, or he or she is equally good at their job as the other individual and is valuable, and you don't want to lose them. So you need to upskill them, and as an island we need to do the same, because we have a limited population. We have historically had full employment, which has got its benefits and its drawbacks, and we're now in a world where the technology spectrum is changing, and we need to make certain that the individuals we've got in our working population, as well as our new children coming through, are actually properly trained, and that needs us to all upskill. Doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or you're running running a business, or you're working in that business. We owe it to ourselves and everyone else that we actually look to it. I'm not going to read the slide. There's just some examples. There's obviously benefits to your people, the organisation, and the wider society, and we've given you some examples of where sometimes just by people being aware of the art of the possible, they actually do things differently and can have some positive impacts on the business. So you might have heard Leyla said
sorry, Nick.
Go on.
Hello.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. It's Mike here, Mike Colville here.
Hi, hi Mike. How you doing?
Hello, I'm well. Hello, well. I just wanted to reflect on some of the challenges that I've seen within businesses based on what you're saying as well, which I haven't quite heard yet. And it's you did use that word permission, I think, but I think one of the challenges is almost that it's that given capacity, expectation to actually taking that pause to think, that ability to collaborate. I've worked for the past 2 companies that I have consulted to. That challenge of almost kind of building in that 5% time or 10% time. It said to people, we expect you to step away from business as usual. We expect you to be collaborating and speaking to people. We're not expecting you to come up with the next best thing or the ideas, but we're allowing you the space to do that. It's been pioneered by many other companies, be it Google, Atlassian, and so forth, to do this. But I think a lot of firms are still struggling with that. It's not just that permission, but almost that expectation to do. So I just wanted to sort of raise that point in a healthy way. But I think it's a real, especially when people are looking at the bottom line as well. They can't see the value that R&D is going to deliver in the short term.
Yeah, and I mean that's an excellent point, Mike. I'll give you a little story. I've got someone who I work for, Simon Perry's our TSP, and Simon and I used to have a little joke every year, and he came up with the phrase the luxury item. And every time I set my objectives, what's your luxury item going to be this year, Nick? And my luxury item would be, Simon, I'm going to go off and learn about this. I'm going to go and do this. I don't know where it's going, but it's giving that capacity and the ability to actually go and do, whether you call it a skunk tank project, something off the desk, the luxury item, doesn't matter what you call it, and actually giving people the space and the permission to do that, because some of the stuff that then comes back is like, well, okay, I wandered into that meeting I told you about with the client, and they said, well, we just want an API, and I said, yeah, I can do that. And they looked at me and they said, you can do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. Because one of my luxury items have been to go off and learn about something which did exactly that. And I'd been waiting to actually deploy that idea, but I didn't know when, and the client asked me for it. And, so it was, one of those things. So I think you're right, Mike, completely. And I think really another really interesting fact is when you look at financial services, as an industry as a whole, R&D spend, does it exist? Hardly ever, hardly ever within financial services. So why is that? Well, because we're not innovating, and that's the impact of it. But I don't know why people don't spend time thinking about it. But I think that's right, Mike. We have to actually give people time to actually think about what they're actually doing and actually learn these things, and not necessarily know where the payback is going to be. Because sometimes it might be a luxury item, but in 3 years' time, that luxury item turns into a value generator. Does that answer the question?
No, absolutely. I think it's we're of a similar mindset, and I think it is it's very important to reflect on. I think it's wherever we can encourage either individuals or businesses that we work with to really invest in whatever they want to call it, be it innovation, be it R&D or something. But it's as I said, 2 of the past companies I've sort of consulted with is even trying to almost bake that into the contracts. Not trying to force people, but it's sort of saying actually there is an expectation of the company, and hence that should attract the right people as well. But that's sort of going off onto another bit deeper into the challenges. But first and foremost, and what you just reflected on there, you're right. The R&D just didn't exist. There was an expectation people just to come up with ideas and do something magical, which was going to change the business. The actual time for it was not there.
I think also, Nick, particularly at the moment, there might be a lot of businesses that have time with maybe staff with less less to do than they normally would have, and there is some capacity there. So why not allow teams to use that time to upskill themselves and come up with ideas and better ways of doing things? And that's pretty much the journey that we're on in PwC at the moment, where we're going to be launching a digital upskilling program across the whole business in the Channel Islands, ready to launch in June. And this is a significant investment of time. To your point, Mike, this is about giving people an allocated amount of time, and it is a significant chunk for every single person in the business to upskill themselves and then to work in teams to look at challenges we and our clients are facing and how we're going to resolve those. So Nick, I stole your thunder a little bit there, but maybe you could talk a bit more about what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and I'll come back to Jenny's made a really good point. I'll come back to that in a bit, Jenny. I think you've hit the nail right on the head there on the chat. So so as Leyla said, look, we have been doing we've been on a journey with our technology upskilling program, and we've basically decided this summer that we're going to give everyone it's pretty much a week's time, Mike, to actually upskill themselves. So it's a significant investment. And what we've done is we've taken a look at everything that's on this slide about PwC would talk about the 8 essential technologies globally. I probably would have taken drones off here as well to actually talk about it locally, because I struggle with virtual reality and drones being implemented locally. Globally, if you're trying to measure the size of a pile of iron ore, a drone's probably really helpful to actually survey how big it is, but I don't know how many drones we're actually going to have flying around Guernsey at this point. But the rest of the stuff, blockchain, data analytics, chat bots to make your processes easier, RPA and the Internet of Things, I think are all applicable. And if you ever heard me talk about blockchain, I could bore everyone to tears with it. So those are the seven things we're looking at. And what we've actually looked at then is we've actually looked within our business, said what tools do we actually want people to learn. So on the data analytics side, no surprises, Power BI and Tableau are in there. We already have teams who are working with ClickView and those types of tools. So no surprises there. Alteryx for actually moving data around, cleansing it. Yeah, we've got a load of people that are trained to actually use that tool, and we're actually just going to get everyone to work on it. We've been looking at dedicated time to learn, so the week's time, and we've been looking at incentives. So Leyla mentioned that we're working in teams. I want to commercialize this learning, so I'm going to get them to work in teams. They got a team challenge. Guess what? When we finally came out of lockdown, there's going to be some team prizes. I might put them in an escape room and they've got to escape from that lockdown. But I want to try and get them to actually bond back together in not in a virtual way, but in a physical way again. So they actually come together as a team and get that when we're actually able to get people physically together. So we think that will have a benefit for us and for the wider economy. To come to Jenny's point, which is a really good one, which is making the point that some of what we're talking about is really easy if someone is passionate about it and they're interested in it. And what we found is that there's an intersection between what someone's really passionate about, the business need, and I forget what the third one is now. I had it drawn out. The third one is business need, focus. I think it's the ability to deliver, or there's a third one anyway. But in the intersection of that, you get the best impact, because if you found someone who is really passionate about what they're doing, but there's no business need, it's really just a hobby, yeah. So, but if you found someone that's passionate about it and they're really good at it, and there is a business need, then you've actually got some real value. So those are things you need to look for. Right. So.
Okay, so it's part of the learning journey for our staff is going to begin with something we call the digital fitness app, and ignore all that text there. That's kind of more for what you need to do next. But essentially, our staff complete a questionnaire, and based on your responses, your digital fitness is then assessed, and you're given a score. the good thing is that the app has also looked at where you're strong and where you might need improvement, and then directs you to a bunch of learning that you can use to fill in those gaps. And the learning comes in very different forms. So it could be videos, it could be podcasts, it could be TED Talks, it could be publications. But almost all of the learnings linked to the app are bite-size, easily digestible, kind of 5 minutes here, 7 minutes there. You can then choose to sign up for 20 minutes a week, 30 minutes a week, 60 minutes a week, depending on your goals. And the app will suggest content for you to download and review each week. Now, normally there is a cost for our clients for using the app, but PwC has waived the cost until the end of July, so it's currently free and all the content on there is free. The learning is not all PwC content, it's drawn from all across the globe from many different sources, so it really is the best of the best content you could want to access. And already, since we've made this available for free, we've had 250,000 people download the app, which I found out this morning, Nick, I think is mind-blowing. So you'll see on that slide there's details of how you can access the app, and there's a code there that if you type in, you'll enable yourself to get the you'll be able to get into it for free. But I just think it's a really good way at the moment of, maybe when you would normally be commuting into work, or if you have that bit of spare time, going in and learning something new. And it's all done in a very non-techie way. So Nick is somebody that lives and breathes and loves technology. So you can see how, he gets very excited by some of the learning that he showed on the previous slide. But for others who are maybe kind of not as fully engaged as Nick, some of these subjects might seem a little bit dry, but the way the content is put forward on this app is really engaging and easy to understand, and it makes you begin to think about, right, I could see how that could be relevant in the job that I do and with the clients that I work with. So I do suggest you all go in and take a look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best way of describing it, I think, Leyla, is it's really good curated content. It's not all PwC's content, but there's someone that's been through it. They've watched all the videos. They are good quality videos. There's some TED Talks in there which you may have already seen, but it's someone spent some significant amount of time looking at the content that's gone in there, which makes it's a bit like going to the library and finding out that all the books are good. If you go into the library and you think, well, hang on, this book's not quite accurate, the library ceases to have value. So it filters out some of the stuff that might be out there that isn't such good quality, which is really good. So I know we had some questions already, so shall I take David's question, and then I know there's going to be other questions coming through. David raised a good point about in times of crisis we also get people who are nefarious and dishonest, and I think that's completely right. The number of people that are probably creating scams in this environment and frightening everyone is probably high. So I really do think in this time you need to think very carefully about what you're doing, what frauds are going on. You'll have all seen the Barclays advert with their fraud gorillas that are on the TV, and there's a reason why they're putting that out. Yeah, people are doing bad things, so you've got to protect yourself. And I think the other thing that I would say is that you also need to take your cybersecurity be more careful with what you're doing. You should have a heightened response to what's going on around you. You've got if you've got more staff working from home, you need to be thinking about what they're doing. You've increased your architecture of your IT systems. We know that some companies are actually allowing people to log in using their own devices over Citrix. You need to be thinking about how that's configured. So yeah, I really do think you do need to think about what you're doing. I think that's a good point, David. Where does so Tim, you raised a question. What does the assessment of financial viability of an idea fit into the framework? Yeah, so if you can't sell it and you can't make money, I think we discussed this partly last week, didn't we, Leyla? If it's only a problem that you've got, it could be a vanity project. So you need to go out and you need to validate. Does everyone else have this problem? Is it a problem that I'm actually it's just me that's got, or is everyone got the same problem? And I said last week that one of the things that we started printing over here, and it wasn't designed here, was the headbands to actually stop people getting cut ears when they wear masks. So everyone was wearing these masks, and they're getting cuts behind the ears. It's not very pleasant. So, but they all figured out they had the same problem. So I do think if you want to have a financial impact, you need to make certain that you've actually assessed the problem and made certain it isn't just you that's got it. Leyla, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think it's very much part of that testing phase. Part of the testing of the product needs to include testing of the market as well, and that willingness to buy is got to be part of that.
Cool. So any other questions? I know we were scheduled for 3, weren't we? We were.
Well, I think we're scheduled for 2:45, but anyway.
Was it? Oh, oh, so I've blown it.
And thank you, Abigail's just put up the code there for the digital fitness app, but we'll post this deck, send it around to everybody later.
Okay. Yeah. So last piece from us. So Steve Jobs always told you to think differently, and if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. So if you haven't got a solution, keep looking. If you've still got a problem, keep going at it. He was very much of that mindset. You kept looking at it until you got it right, and that's that ethos built Apple. Cool. Anything else, Leyla?
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed that.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.